All right, so when the all-new DJI Flip came out, I know a lot of people were making references to this drone right here. This is the HoverAir X1. This is the all-new ProMax version. There's a couple versions that did come out. The X1 Pro, which is the 4K version. This one here is the ProMax, which is the 8K 30 frames a second drone from HoverAir. And this is the drone, like I mentioned, that has that kind of flip out style. But as you can see here, first thing we'll talk about, size. Size is still a big deal when it comes down to small personal drones. And as you can see, the HoverAir X1 Pro Max, this is actually the larger of the two of them. They actually have, the X1 is actually a little bit smaller than this one. But when you're comparing these two together, definitely a big size difference between the Flip and the X1 Pro and Pro Max. And when I fold them down, definitely is a big difference here, and you'll notice it a lot more when you are trying to pack away your gear. This is how skinny and small the HoverAir is compared to the DJI Flip. And in this video, I just want to talk about these two drones right here after flying them for a little while now. The HoverAir X1, I am going to be referencing the Pro Max one. So I do want to go through some comparisons of why you might want to pick up the HoverAir Pro or Pro Max over the DJI Flip, and some reasons why you might want to pick up the Flip over the new Pro and Pro Max. And if you guys haven't seen my previous videos, I did talk about some reasons why you might want the Flip over something like the DJI Neo, as well as why you might want to upgrade over to the DJI Mini 4 Pro. If you guys want to see those videos, I'll make sure to list it down below in the video description. And one thing to note before we jump into those reasons of why you might want to pick one over the other, I am only going to be comparing the quick shots or the built-in shots that come on the drone. I'm not going to be comparing the remote controls at this moment, mainly because the DJI Flip, I do have the remote control and it works really well with this one. But with the HoverAir, if you want to actually control the drone, you're going to need to pick up a beacon as well as the remote control. And I did get one of the very first units of the beacon as well as the remotes, and for some reason it's actually not working at the moment. But later on in the video, I will be talking about the remote controls and some of the differences there as far as what you're able to do range-wise and some of the other options between the two. So let's jump right in and talk about the advantages and why you might want to pick up the HoverAir X1 Pro or the Pro Max. First and foremost, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, size. The size of these drones, right, this drone right here is super small and compact. And like I said, it does fold, so you're able to take this out. This one you can actually toss onto the palm of your hand, a little bit better than this one here, and get this thing up and flying. As far as footprint goes, much smaller compared to the Flip. So portability is your number one reason, and this is something that you want to throw into your pocket while you're out there going on a hike, going on a bike ride. This drone right here definitely is a lot easier to carry around compared to the Flip. Next advantage of the HoverAir is this drone right here, I would say, is a lot more geared towards using it without a remote control. And just for some context, the HoverAir is one of the first drones that came out where you don't need a remote control. You can just press which option you want here, and it'll then perform that maneuver, similar to what we have here, what DJI came out with on the Flip, as well as the Neo. You don't need a remote control. You can actually just press this button here on the side, choose what quick shot you want to do, and the drone will perform those routes. I think being that that was the main purpose of the HoverAir, they have a lot more parameters you can change when it comes down to some of those quick shots. The one thing I like about the HoverAir shots is that the drone goes a little bit further away from you compared to the Flip. When I'm doing some of these drone shots or the follow shots, I feel like the Flip is just a little too close. I would love to be able to push back this drone maybe about another, I'd say 10 or 20 feet away from me in order for me to get a little bit more of the environment, a little more of my body in the shot. That's something I think the HoverAir does well. It gives you a little bit better distance away, so you are able to see yourself a little bit more. You're able to get a little bit more environment. Hopefully that's still something. I mentioned that on the Neo video, and that's something here too. And speaking of those quick shots, the one advantage I do like here on the HoverAir is that when you are performing something like the circle or the orbit, the HoverAir actually allows you to be up and higher away, where the circle on the Flip keeps you at pretty much level. So if you find yourself wanting to do a circle and you do have things that are around your height, like bushes or any branches or trees that are around your height, your drone will probably go right into it because this drone does not go up high enough when you're doing things like circle. Next, we'll talk about some advanced tracking that the HoverAir offers, which the Flip does not. And I think it's more of an extension of those intelligent flight modes. The HoverAir does have a couple extra modes on here, which they've enhanced. We have a ski mode as well as a bike mode on the HoverAir. They have some enhancements here on the battery, and then they also have a new bicycle mode, which is really cool. They have the option to choose whether you want it to follow in an open area or if you want to follow in a more narrow space. Again, I like the fact that they do have more of those advanced modes here. If tracking and if kind of keeping this as a smaller personal vlogging style camera is your main focus, they have a bunch more features on the HoverAir. This is the ProMax, but they have it on the Pro as well here on this drone compared to the Flip. Next, we're talking about obstacle avoidance. Now, on the DJI Flip, we do have this infrared sensor here at the very front, but the one thing that is nice about the HoverAir, this is the ProMax version, is that we do have a rear camera here where we do not have one on the DJI Flip. The rear obstacle avoidance definitely helps out if you're trying to do something like the dolly track where the drone is actually flying backwards and you're kind of walking towards the drone. So if there is anything behind it here, at least you have some obstacle avoidance options on the HoverAir versus the Flip. We don't have any rear cameras, any rear vision here on the Flip in case you were to do anything that was going backwards. Next, we'll talk about video resolution, and we do have the option to go with a higher resolution. Now, they both have a 1/1.3 inch sensor. So sensor wise, they're the same. They just have a bumped up 8K resolution on this one. However, everything I'm normally shooting and exporting out is going to be in 4K. So if you do have the need to have out of camera 8K, they do have the option here on the HoverAir ProMax or HoverAir X1 ProMax version. However, if you don't need that 8K and you just want 4K 60 frames a second, they have the Pro version. Both drones are rated for level 5 wind resistance, but because we also have propeller guards on here, yes, it can take better wind than some of the smaller drones like the Neo. However, this thing will still get kind of tossed around. Both of these will kind of get tossed around. If there's really high gusts of wind, you'll see these kind of move around a lot in the air. But technically, they are both rated level 5 wind resistance. And finally, the last advantage we have here is internal storage. 64 gigs internal on the HoverAir. We also have 32 gigs internal on the Pro version. This is the ProMax. ProMax has 64 gigs. Here on the DJI Flip, we only have 2 gigs internal. So not much you can do here. You're going to need to have an SD card on this drone. Those are just some of the advantages I saw with the HoverAir X1 Pro and Pro Max. Now let's jump over to why you might want to pick up the Flip over the HoverAir. First, we'll talk about price. $439 for the drone, and you also get a remote control. Like I mentioned earlier, you get the remote control and the drone for $439. We're here with the HoverAir. If you were to get the Pro version, the Pro model comes in at $499 just for the drone only. And then if you wanted to get a remote control and you wanted to be able to fly it manually with a remote, you're going to need to pick up something like the beacon and remote control setup. So you have $638 for that setup. Now this is the Pro Max version, drone only, $699 for just the drone. And if you wanted to add in the remote control, you're at $838 for this setup right here. So when it comes down to cost, yes, it's going to be a lot more affordable to go with something like the DJI Flip compared to the HoverAir Pro and Pro Max. Next we'll talk about is transmission and range. So if you were to pick up the drone, the DJI Flip, and you wanted to have the remote control or fly it with the remote control, the transmission between your remote control and the drone takes you out about 13 kilometers in range. Now with the HoverAir, even if you were to add in the beacon and remote control, you can only take this out about 1 kilometer in range, as that distance between your remote control and the drone. The best thing about the Flip at that price point of $439 is out of the box. You can now take this drone, do a bunch of these selfie types of maneuvers, but you can also use the remote control and fly it far out there and get those really, really nice landscape shots. You're able to take the Flip high up in the air and get some amazing videography and photography types of shots. And that's something you're not able to do with the HoverAir unless you get the beacon and joystick combo. And of course, you have that trusted DJI transmission, which is extremely important, especially when you're out there and you want to be able to fly with confidence. Again, I don't have the updated beacon. I'm waiting for that one. And once I do that, I'll be able to do a little bit more range tests. But when it comes down to just flying it with a remote control, that distance is going to be a big factor. And that's something I still need to test out a little bit more on the HoverAir. Next advantage we're talking about is flight time. The DJI Flip, you have a rated 31 minutes of flight time, where here on the HoverAir, we have a a rated 16 minutes of flight time. Now, if you're just using it for just those quick selfies, maybe that battery life isn't gonna mean as much, but if you wanna be able to use that drone, not only for those vlog selfie types of shots, but you wanna get out there and fly your drone, you know, a few hundred feet, 1,000 feet away and get some really nice landscapes, you have that longer battery life here on the DJI Flip. And there it is, guys. Just some of the reasons why you might want to pick up the DJI Flip over the HoverAir X1 Pro and Pro Max, and also some reasons why you might want to pick this drone up over the Flip. I really like the small, compact design on this. We have high resolution if you were to get the Pro Max. Got that 8K. You also have the rear sensor here. And you just have a much lighter, smaller, compact drone that you're able to stick into your pocket. At the end of the day, I think it really does come down to your use case. If you only want a drone for just close proximity, hiking, biking, following you, and you want the smallest, most compact, highest quality drone out there, you're probably gonna look at the HoverAir Pro as well as the Pro Max. The only downside, like I said, comes in at a heftier price compared to the Flip. Now, even though we don't have as much, I would say, custom settings on those follow modes that we do have here on the HoverAir, again, we do have that lower price point, and you have that DJI trusted technology and that transmission. So that definitely does play into an advantage for the DJI Flip. There's definitely some nice options out there for you. We have the DJI Flip, we have the HoverAir X1 Pro, Pro Max, and if you guys haven't seen my videos on the Neo as well as the Mini 4 Pro, those will be linked down below in the video description. As always, if you guys got some value from this video, a big like would be much appreciated. This is Ultra Anastacio with FlytPath.com. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.